Dad's credit card only stays active if my stepmom is in a good mood. One wrong move from her and we're threatened with being cut off from everything, even food. I lost my mum 10 years ago, but the agony of losing a living father, combined with my crippling fear of marriage, has brought me to a final crossroads. While everyone is pressuring me to walk down the aisle, I can't help but wonder, will my refusal to say I do destroy my little sister's lives forever? But the big question is, what is the real mystery behind Dad's drastic change? How did an outsider manage to methodically isolate a father from his own flesh and blood? Where does this spiral of toxic family drama actually end? And finally, will she be able to overcome her trauma and sacrifice herself for her sister's future? Or will she choose a path of lonely isolation? I'm Sneha, and I'll be guiding you through this story today. Let's not wait any longer. Let's dive right in and uncover the heartbreaking truth behind it all. The silence was the loudest thing in our house. I remember the exact moment the clock stopped ticking for us. I was 15, just a kid really. I was worrying about sophomore year geometry tests and whether the boy in my third period history class liked me back. Normal, stupid, teenage stuff. And then, in the span of a single heartbeat, my entire universe collapsed. Mum was gone. A cancer didn't just take her, it hollowed out our home. It took the smell of cinnamon pancakes on Sunday morning. It took the warmth from the living room. It took the sound of humming from the kitchen. When we lowered her casket into the ground under that grey, weeping sky, I looked at my dad. He looked like a man who had been physically broken in half. He was standing there holding my little sister's hand, his knuckles white, tears streaming down a face I had only ever seen smile. For 2 years, it was just us, the survivors. That's what we called ourselves privately. Me, my 2 little sisters, and Dad. We were a team. We learned to cook spaghetti without burning the house down. Dad learned how to braid hair, his clumsy large fingers trying so hard to be gentle. We grieved, yes, but we grieved together. We huddled on the couch on Friday nights watching movies, trying to fill the empty space Mum left behind with our own collective body heat. I thought that bond was unbreakable. I thought that shared trauma was like super glue, messy, painful, but permanent. I was wrong. It started subtly about 2 years after Mum passed. Dad started smiling at his phone. He started wearing cologne again, that musky scent he hadn't touched since Mum's diagnosis. He started coming home late, claiming business meetings, but his eyes looked lighter, hopeful. When he told us he wanted to get married again, I felt a knot of ice in my stomach. Not because I didn't want him to be happy. God knows I wanted him to smile again, but I was terrified of the variable, the unknown. Her name is Elena, he said, his voice trembling a little like a teenager asking for permission. She makes me feel alive, Sneha, and she wants to take care of you girls. She wants to be part of this family. We nodded, we smiled. We swallowed our fears because we loved him. We thought, how bad could it be? If Dad loves her, she must be kind. She must be like Mom. But fairy tales are for storybooks. Reality is far more brutal. The wedding was small. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Polished, articulate. She smiled at us with perfect white teeth, but her eyes didn't crinkle at the corners. They were calculating, like she was appraising a piece of furniture she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. Shortly after the wedding, Dad announced that his business was expanding. He needed to move to a different state, a few hours away by flight. The plan was for them to set up the new headquarters and we would stay back for school or visit during holidays. It seemed logical, practical. But distance is a dangerous thing. It gives people room to hide who they really are. The first few months were okay. FaceTime calls were frequent. Dad seemed happy, but then the static started. It began with the phone calls. I'd call Dad to tell him about my grades or something funny my little sister did, and she would answer. Oh, sweetie. Her voice would drip with a sickly sweet syrup that made my skin crawl. Your father is so tired. He's been working all day for you girls, so let's not bother him right now, okay? I'll tell him you called. He never called back. At first, I thought he was just busy. He was building an empire after all. But then came the first visit. We flew out to see them in their new house. It was a mansion, pristine, white, cold. It looked like a museum, not a home. Nothing was out of place. No family photos on the mantel. No pictures of us. Just art, abstract, expensive and empty. Dinner that first night is etched into my memory like a scar. We were sitting at this long glass dining table. The clinking of silverware was the only sound. I tried to break the ice. Dad, I said, leaning forward. You won't believe what happened with the car. The transmission is acting up again, and I was thinking maybe... Sneha, she interrupted. She didn't look at me. She was cutting her steak with surgical precision. Must we talk about money the moment you arrive? Your father has a headache. I froze. I wasn't talking about money. I was just telling him about the car. It implies money, doesn't it? She looked up then, her gaze sharp. Repairs cost money. Everything costs money. You girls really need to learn the value of $1. Your father isn't an ATM. I looked at Dad. I waited for him to laugh. I waited for him to say, Elena, relax. She's just talking about the car. I waited for him to be my dad, but he didn't. He kept his head down, pushing peas around his plate. Let's just have a nice dinner, he mumbled. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who was this man? This wasn't the man who braided hair. This wasn't the man who held us at the funeral. This was a stranger in my father's skin. That weekend was a blur of passive-aggressive comments. If we laughed too loud, we were disrupting the peace. If we slept in, we were lazy. If we asked for anything, even a ride to the store, we were demanding. And every time we tried to defend ourselves, she would turn to Dad, her eyes suddenly welling up with fake tears. See, honey, see how they treat me? I try so hard to welcome them, and they are so hostile. They just don't want you to be happy. And that was the weapon. That was the dagger she twisted in his gut. They don't want you to be happy. She knew his weakness. She knew he felt guilty for moving away, guilty for being happy after Mum died. She weaponized his guilt against us. I remember the first big fight. I was 17 then. I had found out she was telling relatives back home that we were out of control and spending all of Dad's money on drugs and parties. It was a lie so absurd I almost laughed, but then my aunt called me screaming, asking how I could shame the family like that. I confronted Dad. Dad, she's lying, I screamed, standing in his office. She's telling everyone we're on drugs. You know me. You know us. Dad looked tired. He looked aged. He rubbed his temples. Sneha, lower your voice. Elena is just concerned. Maybe she misunderstood something. Misunderstood. I felt like I was losing my mind. She is making things up. She hates us, Dad. Can't you see that? Suddenly, Elena walked in. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just walked over to Dad and placed a hand on his shoulder, looking at me with pure, unadulterated pity. Oh, darling, she said to him, ignoring me completely. See, this is that aggression I was telling you about. It's the stress. She's unstable. Maybe we need to cut back on their allowance. Money fuels this kind of behaviour. What? I gasped. This isn't about money. This is about respect. Dad looked at her hand on his shoulder, then at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes. I saw the war between the father he was and the husband he was trying to be. And then I saw the light go out. Maybe she's right, Sneha, Dad said, his voice flat, dead. You're acting hysterical. We're going to pause the transfers for a month until you calm down. I stood there stunned. It wasn't about the money. I didn't care about the cash. It was the principle. He had just taken her word, a lie, over mine, over his daughter's. You can't be serious, I whispered. Dad, it's me. It's Sneha. That's enough, he said, turning his back to me to look out the window. Go to your room. That night, lying in the guest room of that cold, sterile house, I realised something terrifying. We hadn't just lost Mom, we were losing him too. He was physically there, but he was receding, like a tide going out before a tsunami. He was choosing the path of least resistance. It was easier to shut us up than to shut her down. She had figured out the algorithm. If she created chaos every time he showed us affection, he would eventually stop showing affection just to keep the peace. It was classical conditioning, like training a dog, and it was working. As the months turned into years, the visits became fewer. The phone calls became transaction-based. Did you pay the tuition? Yes. Okay, bye. We stopped telling him about our lives. He didn't know I liked painting. He didn't know my sister was being bullied at school. He didn't know the youngest one cried herself to sleep calling for Mom. He knew nothing. He only knew what Elena told him. And Elena told him we were parasites, ungrateful, greedy daughters who only wanted his wallet. She rewrote our history. She painted us as the villains in his life story, and she was the saviour protecting him. And because we were proud, because we were hurt, we reacted with anger. We fought back. We screamed, which only proved her point. See, she would say, so angry, so ungrateful. It was a trap, a quicksand we couldn't escape. Now, 10 years later, the transformation is complete. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders is gone. In his place is a financier, a distant relative who pays the bills to avoid a lawsuit or a scandal. But recently things have shifted again. The threats have become more specific. It's not just about cutting back anymore. It's about control. Absolute, total control. Last week, my sister needed emergency dental work. It was expensive. I called Dad. Elena answered. He's in the shower, she said, her voice breezy. It's an emergency, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Ria is in pain. We need the insurance card details. Well, she paused and I could hear the smile in her voice. I don't know if we can do that right now, Sneha. Your father and I were discussing the future. And frankly, we're not sure if you girls deserve our help this month. I saw on Instagram that you went out for coffee yesterday. If you have money for lattes, you have money for dentists. Are you insane? I snapped, my temper flaring. It was a $5 coffee. This is surgery. Watch your tone, she hissed, the mask slipping for a second. Or I will make sure that credit card is declined before you even reach the reception desk. You want your sister to keep her teeth? Then you learn to beg nicely and maybe apologise for your attitude last Christmas. I gripped the phone so hard I thought the screen would crack. My sister was sobbing in the background, holding her jaw. I had a choice. I could scream. I could tell her to go to hell. I could fight for my dignity, or I could save my sister. I closed my eyes. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I pictured my dad's face. Not the empty face he wears now, but the face of the man who used to love me, and I killed a parts of myself. I'm sorry, Elena. Please help us. That's better, she purred. I'll ask your father if he's in a good mood. She hung up. I sat there staring at the blank screen, shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard realisation. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a hostage situation, and we were the prisoners. But what I didn't know then, sitting on that floor with my sister crying beside me, was that this was just the beginning. The dental bill was nothing. A test run. Because Dad has a secret, something he hasn't told us, something Elena is using to tighten the noose around our necks. And as I looked at the bank notification pop up on my phone, transfer received, I didn't feel relief. I felt dread. Because money always comes with strings attached. And I had a sinking feeling that this time the price wouldn't just be an apology. This time the price was going to be my life. The drive to their house was 3 hours of pure, unadulterated anxiety. My sisters Ria and Tiana were in the back seat. Tiana was asleep, her head resting against the window, vibrating slightly with the hum of the old Honda Civic. Ria was scrolling nervously through her phone, but I knew she wasn't actually reading anything. She was just looking for a distraction. We hadn't seen Dad in 6 months. The dental bill incident from last week had left a metallic taste in my mouth, a residue of shame and anger. But we decided we couldn't let it end like that. We couldn't let a phone call be the defining line of our relationship. We had to see him. We had to look him in the eye and remind him that we were real people, his flesh and blood, not just expenses on a spreadsheet. We didn't tell them we were coming. A surprise visit? It was a gamble, I knew that. In the old days, a surprise visit meant bear hugs and ordering pizza. Now, it felt like we were invading a hostile nation. I pulled into the driveway of the White Museum. That's what we called their house. It was a sprawling modern estate with manicured hedges that looked like they were cut with lasers. It was beautiful, impressive, and completely soulless. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Okay, I said, turning to look at the girls. Game face is on. Be polite. Don't take the bait. If Elena says something snarky, just smile and swallow it. We are here for Dad. Only Dad. Ria nodded, looking pale. Got it. Operation Don't Poker the Bear. We walked up the stone path. I rang the doorbell. The chime echoed inside like a cathedral. A full minute passed, then another. I reached out to ring it again, but the heavy oak door swung open. It wasn't Dad. Of course it wasn't Dad. Elena stood there. She was wearing a silk caftan that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. She looked at us not with anger, but with a mild, confused amusement, like we were door-to-door salespeople selling something she definitely didn't want. Oh, she said. No hello, no welcome, just oh. Hi, Elena, I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. We wanted to surprise Dad. We haven't seen him in so long. And with the long weekend, we thought, he's naping, she interrupted, blocking the doorway with her body. He had a very stressful week. The market is down. His blood pressure is up. She looked at me pointedly. Stress kills, you know. The implication was clear. You are the stress. You are the killers. We won't bother him, I pleaded, feeling that familiar desperation rising. We just want to hug him and we can wait in the living room until he wakes up. She sighed, a long, dramatic exhale that ruffled the silk of her dress. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch. Well, you're here now. I suppose sending you back would be cruel. Come in, but take your shoes off. We just had the floors imported from Italy. We stepped inside. The air conditioning was set to Arctic. The house smelled of lilies and bleach. It was terrified of being lived in. We sat on the edge of the white leather sofa, afraid to lean back. 10 minutes passed, 20. Elena didn't offer us water. She sat in an armchair across from us, scrolling through her iPad, occasionally glancing up to inspect us. You've gained weight, Tiana, she said suddenly. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Tiana, who was 16 and struggling with body image issues, shrank into herself. I guess, just a little. Carbs, Elena said, shaking her head. Your mother had a slow metabolism too, didn't she? Poor things. Genetics are a curse. I opened my mouth to defend my mother, to defend my sister, but then I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps coming down the stairs. Dad. I stood up, my heart hammering. Dad. He turned the corner. He was wearing a bathrobe, looking groggy. His hair was thinner than I remembered, greying at the temples. He looked diminished, as if he had shrunk inside his own body. When he saw us, his eyes widened for a split second, just a microsecond. I saw a flash of joy, that old spark. But then his eyes darted to Elena, sitting in the armchair like a queen on her throne, and the spark died. Sneha, he said, his voice rough. Girls? What are you doing here? We came to see you, Dad, Rhea said, her voice small. She ran over to hug him. He hugged her back, but it was stiff. He was patting her back awkwardly, his eyes still fixed on Eleanor. He was waiting for the signal. He was waiting to know how he was supposed to feel about. We didn't know you were coming, Dad said, pulling away from Rhea. He looked at me. You should have called, Sneha. We have plans tonight. I wanted it to be a surprise, I said, feeling the sting of tears. I missed you, Dad. I missed you too, he mumbled, but he was already backing away, moving closer to Elena. He went and stood behind her chair, placing a hand on the backrest, physically aligning himself with her. Us against them. Well, Elena said, clapping her hands once. Since you're here, you might as well stay for lunch, but then you'll have to head back. Your father needs his rest. Lunch was a battlefield. We sat at the long table again. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Elena dominated the conversation. She talked about their upcoming trip to Paris, the new curtain, the charity gala she was organising. She never asked us a single question. I tried to pivot. Dad, remember that old cabin we used to go to near the lake? I was thinking maybe this summer. Sold it, Dad said abruptly. He didn't look up from his soup. I froze. What? We sold it? Elena answered for him. Last month. It was a money pit, damp, mouldy, and in the middle of nowhere. Besides, we're looking at a villa in Tuscany. That cabin was where Mom had spent her last happy summer. Her height chart was carved into the doorframe. Her paintings were stacked in the attic. You sold it? I whispered, my voice trembling. Did you keep our stuff? Mum's easel, the photo albums? Dad stopped eating. His hand hovered over his spoon. We cleared it out, Elena said breezily. Most of it was junk, honey. We donated it to Goodwill. Simplicity is key to a happy life. Clutter weighs down the soul. Junk, my mother's legacy, my childhood junk. I looked at Dad. I needed him to be angry. I needed him to say, no, Elena, that wasn't junk. That was my wife. Those were memories. Dad, I said, my voice cracking, you threw away Mum's painting. Dad finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes terrified me more than any anger could. It was emptiness, a vast, hollow vacancy. He wasn't there. The man who had cried at Mum's funeral, who had cherished every doodle she ever made, was gone. It was just stuff, Sneha, he said softly. Elena is right. We need to move forward. You girls live in the past too much. It's unhealthy. It felt like a physical blow. He was parroting her. He was speaking her words with his voice. Unhealthy. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Remembering Mom is unhealthy. Loving you is unhealthy. Sit down, Elena snapped. Her voice was like a whip. Do not raise your voice in my house. This is my father's house, I yelled, the dam finally breaking. And I am speaking to my father. Dad, look at me. Why are you letting her do this? She's erasing us. She's erasing Mum. Dad looked pained. He rubbed his temples, his face flushing red. Sneha, please. My blood pressure, It's not your blood pressure, Dad. It's your spine, I screamed. Where did you go? Why are you afraid of her? That is enough. Elena stood up. She wasn't tall, but she loomed over the room like a dark cloud. She turned to Dad. Darling, I told you they came here to cause trouble. I told you they only want to hurt us. She started to cry. It was a masterful performance. A single perfect tear rolled down her cheek. I try so hard. I cook for them. I welcome them. And this is how they treat me in my own home. Dad looked at her tears and panic seized him. He couldn't handle her upset. He couldn't handle the aftermath, the silent treatment, the withholding of affection, the chaos she would unleash on him later. He turned to me, his face hardened. Get out, he said. The room went silent. What? I whispered. Get out, he said, louder this time. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, staring at the wall. You come here. You upset my wife. You bring up the past. I can't do this, Sneha. I can't handle the drama. Just go. Dad, Rhea sobbed, reaching for his hand. He pulled his hand away. Go back to the apartment. I'll send you some money for the drive. Just go. I looked at him. Really looked at him, and in that moment I realised something that broke my heart more than his words. He wasn't choosing her because he loved her more. He was choosing her because it was easier. He was a hostage who had fallen in love with his chains because the effort to break them was too high. He was willing to sacrifice us, his own daughters, just to keep the peace in his golden cage. He was a coward. Come on, I said to my sisters, my voice icy calm. Let's go. But Sneha, Tiana started. I said, let's go. I grabbed their hands. There's no father here, just a man who pays our bills. We walked out. We left our shoes on as we walked across the expensive Italian floor. I hoped we tracked mud everywhere. As I opened the front door, I looked back one last time. Dad was standing by the window, his back to us. Elena was hugging him from behind, her head resting on his shoulder, looking at us with a small, triumphant smirk. She had won. She had proven that she could snap her fingers and he would throw us out. We got into the car in silence. Rhea was crying softly in the back. Tiana was staring out the window, her face blank. I didn't cry. I felt something else. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in the centre of my chest. That day, the stranger in my dad's eyes became permanent. I realised we were on our own, truly on our own. But as I drove onto the highway, putting miles between us and that house, my phone pinged. A notification. Bank of America. You have received a transfer of $2,000 from Dad. The message attached read, don't come back until you can learn to respect Elena. Use this for your rent. Love, Dad. I looked at the screen. Love, Dad. The word love felt like a dirty joke. He was buying us off. He was paying a fee to make his guilt go away. He was paying us to disappear. He thinks he can fix this with money, I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel. What do we do, Sneha? Rhea asked, her voice trembling. If we don't fix this, he might cut us off for real. How will we pay for college? How will we eat? I looked at the road ahead. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the highway. We survive, I said. We play the game, but from now on, we don't expect love. We just take the check. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple because while Dad thought he was buying peace, he was actually funding his own destruction. And what I didn't know then was that the $2,000 wasn't just hush money. It was a leash. And Elena was about to yank it harder than we ever imagined. Because next week was Tiana's college acceptance deadline and that tuition fee. It was a lot more than $2,000. And when I would call to ask for it, Elena would have a new condition. A condition that would make apologising look like child's play. The acceptance letter from NYU sat on our scarred kitchen table like a ticking time bomb. It was heavy, cream-coloured stationery with a gold embossed logo. For Tiana, my younger sister, it was the holy grail. It was validation. It was proof that despite the screaming matches, the tears and the instability of our home life, she was brilliant. She had gotten into her dream art program. For me, looking at that piece of paper, I didn't see a dream. I saw a number, $52,000. And that was just the tuition for the first year. The deposit, $5,000, was due in 48 hours to secure her spot. Tiana was vibrating with excitement. I got in, Sneha. I actually got in. She was dancing around our cramped apartment, holding the letter to her chest. Dad is going to be so proud. He always said I had Mum's hands for painting. He's going to flip. I exchanged a look with Rhea, my middle sister. Her eyes were wide, filled with the same panic I felt. Tiana didn't get it. She was still living in the memory of who Dad used to be. She didn't understand that Dad didn't pay for dreams anymore. He paid for compliance. Yeah, Ty, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. He's going to be thrilled. But inside I was screaming. We had just been kicked out of his house a week ago. The memory of him saying get out was still burning in my ears. We were currently on the naughty list, and now I had to ask him for $5,000 in 2 days, followed by a lifetime of debt. I knew I couldn't text him. A text is too easy to ignore. I had to call, and I knew who would answer. And I waited until 7 p.m. That was their cocktail hour. If I was lucky, Dad would be on his second scotch and feeling generous. If I was unlucky, Elena would be sober and bored. I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Hello? It was Elena. Her voice was crisp, efficient, like a receptionist at a law firm. Hi, Elena, I said, my voice tight. It's Sneha. Is Dad around? He's busy, she said immediately. We have guests. What do you want, Sneha? We sent the rent money last week. If you're calling for more, it's really quite tacky. I squeezed my eyes shut. I needed to swallow my pride. I needed to beg. It's not rent, I said. Tiana got into NYU, the art program. It's a huge deal, Elena. It's one of the best in the country. She needs the deposit by Friday. There was a silence on the other end, a long, stretching silence. I could hear clinking glasses in the background as someone laughed, a rich, throaty laugh. Art school, Elena finally said, dragging out the words. That's a hobby, isn't it? Not a career. Your father and I were hoping she'd choose something practical, business or nursing. It's her dream, I insisted. Dad knows how good she is. Please, Elena, put him on. He's right here, she said, but he agrees with me. $50,000 for finger painting in this economy. Let me talk to him, I snapped. A pause, then I heard shuffling. Sneha! Dad's voice. He sounded tired, or maybe just drunk. Dad, Tiana got in NYU. I spoke fast, trying to get the words out before she could interrupt. She needs the deposit, please, Dad. This is her future. You promised, Mum, you'd look after our education. I shouldn't have mentioned Mum. I heard his breath hitch. That's a lot of money, Sneha, he muttered. Elena says the ROI on art degrees is terrible. ROI. Return on investment? He was talking about his daughter like she was a stock option. Dad, she's your daughter, not a mutual fund, I cried. Please, just the deposit. We'll figure out the loans later. Don't take this away from her. There was a muffled conversation on the other end. Whispering, I heard Elena's voice, sharp and commanding. Then Dad came back on. Okay, he said. My heart leaped. Okay, you'll send it on one condition, he said, and his voice was flat. Scripted. Elena is being honoured at the Chamber of Commerce Gala this Saturday. Charity work. We want the whole family there to support her. My stomach dropped. A public event. And he continued, reading the terms of the negotiation. We want you girls to present her with the award, to give a speech about how much she's done for our family, how she stepped in when your mother passed. I felt bile rise in my throat. They wanted us to lie, to stand on a stage in front of hundreds of people and publicly validate her, to erase our trauma and paint a pretty picture for their social circle. Dad, you can't be serious, I whispered. You want us to thank her? For what? For isolating us? Those are the terms, Sneha, he said, and for the first time he sounded cold. You want the check for NYU? You show up, you smile, you make Elena look good. It's a transaction. Take it or leave it. I looked at Tiana. She was sitting on the floor, sketching in her notebook, humming a song. She looked so innocent, so hopeful. I closed my eyes. Fine, we'll be there. Saturday, 6 p.m. Don't be late. And wear something decent. Elena will send a stylist to your apartment tomorrow so you don't embarrass us. The line went dead. I put the phone down and walked into the bathroom. I turned on the shower so my sisters wouldn't hear me, and I screamed into a towel until my throat bled. Then I washed my face, walked out and told Tiana, Dad is so proud. He's paying. Saturday arrived like a funeral procession. The stylist Elena sent had brought us dresses that were beautiful but clearly chosen by her. They were modest, pastel, submissive. We looked like bridesmaids in a cult. We drove to the venue, a ballroom in a downtown hotel, crystal chandeliers, waiters with champagne trays, a sea of people in tuxedos and gowns. When we walked in, Dad saw us. He was wearing a black tux, looking handsome and distinguished. For a second, he looked like my dad. He started to walk toward us, a smile forming. But Elena intercepted him. She linked her arm through his, anchoring him. She was wearing a shimmering gold gown, looking like a trophy herself. Girls, she exclaimed loud enough for the nearby table to hear. You look lovely. Finally, out of those dreadful jeans. She leaned in to air kiss my cheek. Up close, she smelled of expensive perfume and gin. Remember the deal? She hissed in my ear, her lips barely moving. You messed this up, the check bounces. She pulled back and beamed. So glad you could make it to support your old stepmom. We played the part, we mingled, we shook hands with Dad's business partners. Oh, these are your daughters, how charming. Yes, I would say, smiling until my jaw ached. We're so proud of Dad and Elena. And how do you get along with the new Mrs. Khan? Oh, she's been a great influence, Rhea would stammer, looking at the floor. It was excruciating. Every interaction was a lie. We were selling our dignity minute by minute. Then came the main event. The host tapped the microphone. And now, to present the Community Pillar Award to Elena Khan, please welcome her 3 loving stepdaughters, Sneha, Rhea and Tiana. Applause. A spotlight hit us. It was blinding. We walked up the stairs to the stage. My legs felt like lead. Tiana looked terrified. Rhea looked like she was going to throw up. I took the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faceless strangers. And then I looked at the front table. Dad was sitting there. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his napkin. He couldn't even watch. He knew what he was buying. He knew he had prostituted his daughter's integrity for a quiet life. Elena was beaming, looking up at me with a predatory anticipation. She wanted her moment. She wanted the public absolution. I took a deep breath. The speech was typed out on a card in my hand. Elena had written it herself. Good evening. My voice echoed through the speakers. We are here to honour Eleanor. I looked at the card. She has been a mother to us when we had none. I couldn't say it. I physically couldn't say it. I paused. The silence stretched. The crowd waited. Elena's smile faltered slightly. Her eyes narrowed. Say it! Her eyes screamed. Say it, or the money is gone. I looked at Tiana standing next to me. I thought about NYU. I thought about her future. I swallowed the vomit in my throat. Elena came into our lives at a difficult time, I said, improvising slightly, my voice shaking. She has been a constant present. She takes care of our father. And for that, for making him happy, we are grateful. I skipped the part about her being a mother. I skipped the part about love. She has taught us a lot about survival, I continued, looking directly at Dad now, and about what really matters in this world. So, congratulations, Elena. The crowd applauded politely. They didn't notice the tension. They didn't hear the subtext. They just saw a nice family moment. Elena walked up to the stage. She hugged me. It was a vice grip. You skipped the line about the mother, she whispered, digging her nails into my arm. That will cost you. She took the award, smiled at the camera and gave a flowery speech about sacrifice, family, value. After the ceremony, we went to find Dad and he was standing by the bar downing a drink. We did it, I said, walking up to him. We did the speech. Where is the check? Dad turned to look at me. His eyes were glassy. Did you have to make it sound so forced? I said what I was paid to say. I shot back. The check, Dad. Tiana needs to mail it tomorrow. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to me. I opened it. It was a cashier's check made out to NYU. Thank you, I said coldly. Sneha, he said, reaching out to touch my arm. I love you girls. You know that, right? This is complicated. I'm trying to balance everything. I pulled my arm away. It's not complicated, Dad. It's business. You're the client. We're the service providers. We provided the happy family package tonight. Next time you want the loving daughters upgrade, let us know. We have rates. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Don't say that. Why? It's the truth. You don't ask how we are. You don't ask about Tiana's art. You just ask if we followed Elena's script. I tucked the check into my purse. We're done here. Enjoy your party. Oh. We walked out of the ballroom, past the champagne, past the lies, and into the cool night air. In the car, Tiana was holding the check, crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm sorry you had to do that for me. I saw her face. I saw how she looked at you. It's okay, Ty, I said, starting the engine. You got the money. You're going to New York. You're going to get out of here. But what about you? Rhea asked from the back seat. You looked broken up there, Sneha. I stared at the red traffic light. I'm fine, I lied. But I wasn't. Something had shifted in me that night. Before, I thought Dad was a victim. Tonight, I realised he was an accomplice. He had watched us humiliate ourselves and he had paid for the privilege. The relationship was dead. The man who raised me was gone. What was left was a bank account. And as I drove home, I realised that living like this, constantly negotiating, constantly performing, constantly constantly swallowing my pride was taking a toll I hadn't calculated. I was 21 years old. I was supposed to be in my junior year of college. I was supposed to be dating. I was supposed to be having fun. Instead, I was the head of a household, a negotiator in a hostage crisis, and a mother to my sisters. I was exhausted, bone deep, soul crushing, exhausted. And the next morning, when I tried to get out of bed to go to my own classes, I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. My brain wouldn't engage. The darkness that had been hovering at the edge of my vision for months finally rushed in. The deal with the devil was done. Tiana was safe, but I was about to pay the price. It didn't happen with a bang. There was no dramatic explosion, no screaming match, no car crash. It was quiet. It was the sound of a battery finally hitting 0% and the screen going black. It was a Tuesday morning in November. The sky outside our apartment window was the colour of a bruised peach, grey, heavy and threatening snow. My alarm had been buzzing for 20 minutes. 6:30 a.m, time to get up, time to shower, time to make breakfast for the girls, time to catch the bus to campus for my constitutional law midterm. I stared at the ceiling. There was a water stain up there shaped like a weeping face. I had stared at it for 3 years, but today it felt like it was mocking me. Get up, Sneha! My brain commanded, move your legs. But my legs didn't move. They felt like they were filled with concrete. It wasn't that I was tired. I mean, I was tired, a bone-deep, marrow-sucking exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. But this was different. This was a paralysis. My body had simply gone on strike. It was rejecting the programming. For 10 years, I had been running on adrenaline and cortisol since I was 15. I had been the shock absorber for this family. I took the hits from Elena. I managed Dad's emotional unavailability. I raised my sisters. I paid the bills. I negotiated the peace treaties. I had spent every ounce of my energy ensuring everyone else survived. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to save any fuel for myself. Sneha! Ria knocked on my door. You're going to be late for your exam. Do you want coffee? I'm sick, I croaked. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I can't go today. Oh no, Ria said through the door. Do you need anything? Just sleep, I whispered. Just leave me alone. I heard her footsteps fade away. I heard the front door close as they left for school. And then I was alone with the silence. I didn't go to the exam. I lay in bed until 2 p.m, staring at that water stain and watching the shadows move across the room. I felt a strange, terrifying numbness. I knew I was destroying my GPA. I knew I was throwing away thousands of dollars in tuition that Dad had grudgingly paid. I knew I was failing. But I couldn't care. It was like the part of my brain responsible for caring had been cauterized. That was day 1. Day 2 was the same. Day 3, I dragged myself to a lecture, sat in the back row and realised I couldn't understand a word the professor was saying. It sounded like static, buzz, buzz, buzz. Everyone around me was typing furiously on their laptops, building their futures, dreaming of law school and internship. And I was sitting there thinking about the electric bill. I was thinking about whether Elena would let Dad send the Christmas money. I was thinking about Tiana's dorm supplies for NYU. I looked at my notebook. It was blank. I stood up in the middle of the lecture. The professor paused and looked at me. 300 students turned their heads. Is everything okay, Miss Khan? The professor asked, adjusting his glasses. I have to go, I blurted out. I walked out of that auditorium and I never went back. The process of dropping out was surprisingly bureaucratic. It wasn't emotional, it was just paperwork. I stood at the registrar's counter, filling out a withdrawal from university form. Reason for withdrawal, personal, effective date, immediate. The lady behind the counter looked at me. She was an older woman with kind eyes. You're a senior, honey, she said softly. You have 3 semesters left. Are you sure you don't want to just take a leave of absence? Oh, I can't afford a leave of absence, I said, my voice hollow. I need to work. I need money now. She stamped the paper. Thump. That sound echoed in my chest. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, the sound of my potential being locked away in a drawer. I walked out of the administration building into the crisp autumn air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anxiety. I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty space where my dream used to be. But the hardest part wasn't doing it. It was hiding it. I couldn't tell myself. Tiana was about to leave for her dream art school. Ria was struggling with high school chemistry. They looked at me as the pillar, the smart one, the one who was going to be a lawyer and save us all. If they knew the pillar had crumbled, the whole roof would come down on them. So I lied. Every morning I packed my backpack, I put on my student face. I left the apartment at 8 a.m. But I didn't go to campus. I went to a diner 3 blocks away. I sat in a booth, nursed a single cup of coffee for 4 hours and scrolled through help wanted ad Craigs. I needed a job, a real job, not an internship, not a volunteer position. I needed cash. Dad's money was becoming more and more conditional. The gala incident had proven that if I wanted to breathe without Elena's permission, I needed my own income. I found a job as a shift supervisor at a retail clothing store in the mall. Minimum wage plus $2. It was soul-crushing work, folding t-shirts, getting yelled at by entitled customers who wanted to return stained jeans, standing on my feet for 9 hours a day. But it was safe. It required zero emotional energy. I didn't have to think. I just had to fold, stack, tag, repeat. It became my meditation, and one evening, about 3 weeks into my new double life, I came home late. My feet were throbbing. I smelled like cardboard and cheap fabric softener. Tiana was in the living room packing her suitcases for New York. The room was a mess of bubble wrap and excitement. Sneha, she chirped, you're late. Library again? Yeah, I lied, kicking off my cheap work shoes and hiding them in the closet so she wouldn't see the price tag sticker I'd forgotten to peel off. Finals are coming up. It's brutal. I bet, she said, holding up a canvas. Hey, do you think I should take the acrylics or buy new ones there? Dad sent an extra $500 for supplies. Buy new ones there, I said, collapsing onto the sofa. Save the luggage weight. You look exhausted, Rhea said, coming out of the kitchen with 2 bowls of instant noodles. Here, eat. I looked at my sisters. They were glowing. Tiana was leaving the nest, escaping the toxicity. Rhea was doing better in school. They were moving forward. And I was the anchor, holding the boat steady so they could fly. But anchors drown. That's their job. They stay at the bottom in the dark so the ship doesn't drift. I'm fine, I said, taking the noodles. Just law school prep is intense. You're going to be the best lawyer, Tiana beamed. And then you'll sue Elena for emotional distress and we'll be rich. They laughed. I laughed with them, but inside I was screaming. I'm not going to be a lawyer, T. I'm folding shirts at the Gap. I'm a dropout. I'm a failure. The shame was a physical weight. It sat on my chest while I slept. It followed me to work. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't stand to look at the girl who had given up. But then reality hit harder. Dad called a week later. I saw his name on the caller ID and felt the familiar spike of cortisol. I was in the break room at work eating a stale bagel. Hello? Sneha. Dad's voice was clipped. Elena was looking at the bank statements. Why are there no charges for your next semester's textbooks? Registration was last week. I froze. My hand gripped the phone. He was tracking us. Of course he was. I bought them used, I improvised. Cash from a senior. Cash? He sounded suspicious. Where did you get the cash? I saved up, I said, from allowances. Look, Dad, I'm busy studying. Is everything okay? We're cutting the allowance, he said abruptly. The air left the room. What? Elena thinks you girls are too dependent, he said, reciting the script. Tiana is going to NYU. That's a huge expense. You're 22, Sneha. You should be working. You can't just be a professional student on my dime forever. Professional student. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am working. I got a part-time job. Good, he said. Then you won't need the monthly stipend. We'll keep paying the rent for the apartment until Rhea graduates high school. But your personal expenses, that's on you now. But Dad, it's time to grow up, Sneha. Elena says struggle builds character. Click. He hung up just like that. I sat in the break room staring at the vending machine. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. He didn't know I dropped out. He didn't know I was already struggling. He just cut the lifeline because she told him to, because she wanted to see if we would drown. I looked at my phone. I had $400 in my checking account. Rent was covered, thank God, but food, utilities, bus fare, Tiana's emergency money, it was all on me. I went back out to the sales floor. My manager, a 19-year-old guy named Kyle, pointed at a pile of jeans. Sneha, Zone 3 is a mess. Fix it. On it, I said. I knelt down on the hard linoleum floor and started folding. Fold, stack, repeat. As I folded those jeans, something inside me hardened. The sadness began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I was done begging. I was done hoping Dad would wake up from his spell. He wasn't coming to save us. No one was coming. I looked at my reflection in the store window. I looked tired. I looked older than 22, but I also looked dangerous. Because a person with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. I had lost my degree. I had lost my father. I had lost my youth. But I still had my sisters. pictures. That night, Tiana left for New York. We drove her to the airport in my beat-up car. We cried. We hugged. Promise me you'll take care of yourself, Tiana whispered, hugging me tight. Don't work too hard on the law stuff, okay? I promise. I lied again, kissing her forehead. Go. Paint the world, T. I watched her walk through security, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She didn't look back. She was running towards her future. I walked back to the car with Rhea. The car wouldn't start at first. It coughed and sputtered, much like my own life. Sneha, Rhea asked, buckling her seatbelt. What are we going to do now? I finally got the engine to turn over. I looked at the dark road ahead. We keep going, I said. We just keep going. I didn't tell her that I had picked up double shifts. I didn't tell her that I was no longer a student. I didn't tell her that I was terrified every single minute of every single day. For the next 2 years, that was my life. I became a machine. I worked my way up to store manager. I worked 60 hours a week. I came home, cooked, checked Rhea's homework, paid the bills and collapsed. I was a ghost in my own life. I had no friends, no hobbies, no date. Men would try to talk to me and I would look through them. I couldn't explain to a guy that I came with a broken family and 2 dependents. I couldn't explain that I wasn't really a 24-year-old woman, but a traumatized mother figure in disguise. I thought I'd reached the bottom. I thought, okay, this is it. This is the routine. I can survive this. But life has a funny way of kicking you when you're down just to see if you'll stay there. And it was a Sunday. 2 years since Tiana left. Rhea was graduating high school soon. My phone rang. It wasn't Dad. It was a number I didn't recognise. Hello? Is this Sneha Khan? A woman's voice, older, stern. Yes? Hi, this is Martha. This is awkward. I'm calling from the Miller family. Your sister, Tiana. She's dating my son, David. My heart stopped. Tiana had a boyfriend. She hadn't told me. Oh, I said, okay, is everything all right? Well, no, actually, Martha said, her voice dripping with judgment. David proposed. They want to get married. Married, I choked. She's 21. She's still in school. Yes, well, we are quite traditional, Martha continued. And we are planning the engagement party. We tried to reach your father, but his wife answered. She was quite dismissive. She said the Khan family doesn't do weddings for the girls. I closed my eyes, Elaine. So, Martha's voice turned icy. I am calling you because if your father isn't going to be involved and if your family is as broken as his wife claims, we need to have a serious conversation about whether Tiana is suitable for our son. We have a reputation to maintain. You understand? The room spun. It wasn't just about money anymore. Now our brokenness was bleeding into Tiana's happiness. My little sister found love and my father's absence was about to destroy it. I gripped the phone. The silent burnout was over. The fire was back. Mrs. Miller, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Tell me when and where I'll be there. I hung up. I looked at my reflection. The tired retail manager was gone. The big sister was back. I had failed at college. I had failed at saving Dad, but I would be damned if I let some judgmental in-laws ruin Tiana's life. But I had no idea what I was walking into. I thought Eleanor was the villain. I was about to learn that Western in-laws are a completely different breed of monster. The Miller estate looked like it was judging my Honda Civic the moment we pulled into the driveway. It wasn't just a house, it was a compound, a sprawling colonial-style mansion in Connecticut, sitting on acres of manicured green lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. There were 2 Audis and a vintage Porsche in the driveway. My car, with its rusted bumper and the Bernie Sanders 2016 inches sticker I couldn't scrape off, looked like a pimple on the face of perfection. I looked over at Tiana. She was vibrating. Not the happy vibration from the acceptance letter years ago. This was pure high voltage anxiety. She was wearing a dress I had bought her with my employee discount, clutching her purse so hard her knuckles were white. Do I look okay? She asked, her voice small. Does this look cheap? You look like $1 million, I lied. My heart was hammering against my ribs. You look like an artist. They're going to love you. David says his mum is particular, Tiana whispered. She asks a lot of questions. I'm good at questions, I said, putting the car in park. I've been dodging Dad's questions for a decade. I can handle a suburban mum from Connecticut. But as we walked up the stone steps, I realised how unprepared I was. I wasn't the confident law student anymore. I was a retail manager, living paycheck to paycheck, pretending to be the matriarch of a crumbling dynasty. David opened the door. He was a sweet kid, tall, blonde, with a face that had never seen a day of hardship. He hugged Tiana like she was glass. Hey, he smiled, looking relieved. You made it. Mum is in the sunroom. Dad's mixing drink. We walked into the house. It smelled of old money, leather, mahogany and expensive candles. We entered the sunroom and there she was, Martha Miller. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a catalogue model for grandmothers of the Hamptons. Cashmere sweater, pearls, silver hair cut in a sharp bob. She stood up as we entered, her eyes scanning us from head to toe. It was a tactical scan. Shoes, check. Hair, check. Posture, check. So, she said, her voice cool and smooth, this is the famous sister. Hi, Mrs. Miller, I said, extending my hand. I'm Sneha. Thank you for having us. She took my hand. Her grip was limp, dismissive. Martha, please. And this is my husband, Robert. Robert was a large man who nodded at us from behind a newspaper. He didn't stand up. Dinner is in 10 minutes, Martha said. David, pour the girls a drink. I assume you drink wine, or is that not done in your culture? The microaggression landed softly, like a feather with a lead weight inside. Wine is fine, I said, keeping my smile plastered on. We moved to the dining room and the table was set for 6, but there were only 5 of us. There was an empty chair at the head of the table, opposite Robert. Who else is coming? Tiana asked innocently. No one, Martha said, unfolding her napkin. That's just symmetry. I hate an uneven table. But to me, that empty chair felt like a spotlight. It was where my father should have been. It was the physical manifestation of our lack. The interrogation began with the salad course. So, Sneha, Robert said, finally speaking, David tells us you were studying law. Which firm are you with now? I froze. I had a fork full of arugula halfway to my mouth. Tiana looked at me, panic in her eyes. She knew the truth, but David didn't. Tiana had told David I was taking a break to manage family affairs. I'm actually taking a sabbatical, I said, the word tasting like sawdust, to focus on personal projects. A sabbatical? Martha raised an eyebrow. At 24, my, how luxurious. In our day, we worked until we dropped. I work, I said quickly. I manage a retail operation. Retail? Martha repeated the word as if I had said sewage management. She took a sip of her wine. I see, and your parents, David mentioned your father is in international business. Here it comes, the kill shot. Yes, I said. He's based out of state, import, export. We tried to call him, Martha said, setting her glass down. The room went dead silent. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. You did? Tiana squeaked. Yes, Martha continued, her eyes locking onto mine. When David said he wanted to propose, Robert insisted on doing things the right way, asking the father for the hand. Traditional respect. She paused for effect. A woman answered. Martha said, his wife, Elena? My stomach dropped to the floor. She was colourful, Martha said with a tight fake smile. She told us that your father couldn't come to the phone because he doesn't handle minor domestic issues. She also mentioned that if Tiana wants to get married, she shouldn't expect assent from them. She called you girls, what was the phrase, Robert? Liabilities, Robert grunted, cutting his steak. The word hung in the air. Liabilities. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Tiana. She was staring at her plate, tears swimming in her eyes. David looked mortified. Mum, please, David whispered. Not now. When, David? Martha snapped, her mask slipping. Ideally, we discuss this before you give a ring to a girl who comes with that kind of baggage. Marriage is a merger, David. It's not just about love. It's about family. And frankly, she turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. We are concerned about the stability of this union. If your own father won't even take a phone call to discuss his daughter's wedding, what does that say about her? What kind of scandal are we inviting into the Miller family? It's not a scandal, I said, my voice shaking. My father is complicated. Complicated is a euphemism for dysfunctional. Martha shot back. We are a respectable family, Sneha. We have a standing in this community. We do Thanksgiving dinners, we do Christmas cards, we don't do estranged fathers and stepmothers who call their stepdaughters liabilities. She pointed her fork at the empty chair. That chair represents your father, Sneha. It's empty, and I have a feeling it's going to stay empty. Are you expecting us to pay for the wedding? Are you expecting David to support Tiana's artistic hobbies? I don't expect anything, Tiana whispered, a tear finally rolling down her cheek. Speak up, dear, Martha said sharply. If you want to be a Miller, you need a spine. That was it. Something snapped in me. It was the same snap I felt when I walked out of the university. The same snap when I hung up on Dad. I stood up. My chair made a loud screech against the hardwood floor. Sneha, David looked alarmed. That's enough, I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was low, steady and furious. Excuse me. Martha looked affronted. Sit down, young lady. No, I said. I placed my hands on the table and leaned in. You want to talk about class, Martha? You want to talk about respect? Class isn't about your zip code or your husband's bank account. Class is about how you treat guests in your home. How dare you? Robert started to stand up. Sit down, Robert, I barked. He was so shocked he actually sat back down. My sister, I pointed at Tiana, is the most talented, kind-hearted, resilient person you will ever meet. She survived the death of her mother. She survived the abandonment of her father. She put herself through NYU on a scholarship and sheer grit. She is not a liability. She is a survivor. I looked at Martha. And yes, our family is broken. My father is a coward who let his new wife poison him against us. That is our tragedy. But do not dare use our trauma as a weapon to humiliate her. You're worried about your reputation. You should be worried that your son is about to marry into a family that knows the value of loyalty. Something you clearly know nothing about. I grabbed my purse. Tiana comes with me, I said. If David wants to marry her, he marries her. Not her father, not her bank account. And certainly not with your permission. I turned to Tiana. Yeah, let's go, Ty. Tiana stood up. She looked at David. David looked at his mother, then at Tiana. He looked terrified. He didn't move. David, Tiana whispered. David looked down at his shoes. Ty, maybe we should just cool off. She's just protective. The silence that followed was deafening. He didn't stand up. He didn't defend her. He sat there under his mother's thumb. Tiana's face crumbled. It was worse than the insults. It was the betrayal. I see, Tiana whispered. She took the engagement ring off her finger. It made a tiny clink as she set it on the fine china plate. We walked out of the mansion, down the stone steps, past the Porsches and got into my Honda. I drove for 10 minutes in silence. Then Tiana started to scream. It wasn't a cry. It was a guttural, primal scream of heartbreak. She punched the dashboard. She kicked the floor mats. Why? She screamed. Why does it always happen to us? Why can't we just be normal? Why does she, Elena, have to ruin everything even from 1,000 miles away? I pulled the car over to the side of the dark road. I grabbed Tiana and pulled her into a hug. She sobbed into my shoulder, her body shaking. It's not fair, she wept. Sneha, it's not fair. I loved him. I know, I whispered, stroking her hair. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Dad didn't even pick up the phone, she choked out. He let Elena answer. He knew what she would say. He's gone, T, I said, the truth finally coming out of my mouth, raw and unpolished. The dad we knew is dead. We have to stop looking for him in that empty chair. He's never going to sit there. Tiana pulled back. Her mascara was running down her face. She looked at me with eyes that were suddenly much older. So what do we do? She asked. We're alone, Sneha. We have no parents, no money, no influence. How do we fight people like the Millers? How do we win? I looked out the windshield at the dark, winding road. The anger I felt at the dinner table had crystallised into something colder, something stronger. We don't fight them, I said. We become them, but better. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done folding shirts, I said. I'm done hiding. I'm done being the victim of this story. I started the car. You're going to finish your art degree, I told her, and I'm going to get our money back. All of it. How? Tiana asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I know one thing. Dad has a business he built with Mum, and technically, legally, Mum's share was never fully settled. I remembered something then, a conversation I overheard years ago before Mum died. Something about a trust fund, something about assets protected for the girls. I had ignored it because I trusted Dad. I thought he would take care of us, but now we're going to sue him, I said. Tiana gasped. Sue Dad? No, I smiled, a dark, grim smile. We're going to sue the company, and we're going to make Elena pay for every single tear you shed tonight. The sadness was gone. The burnout was gone. In its place was a mission. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a soldier, and I was about to declare war on my own father. But as I drove us back to our tiny apartment, I didn't realise that declaring war is easy. Fighting it, that's where the blood gets spilled. And I was about to uncover a secret about Dad's business that would put us in more danger than a bad dinner party ever could. The lawyer's office smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was located in a strip mall in Queens, sandwiched between a laundromat and a cash for gold pawn shop. Not exactly the high-powered legal firm from Suits, but Mr. Henderson was the only attorney who agreed to take our our case on a contingency basis. It's a mess, Sneha, Mr. Henderson said, loosening his tie. He was a frantic little man with sweat patches under his arms. He pushed a stack of papers across the cheap laminate desk. I've pulled the incorporation documents for your father's company from 15 years ago, the original charter. I leaned forward, my heart thumping against my ribs. And you were right, he said, tapping a yellowed page. Your mother wasn't just a silent partner, she was a co-founder. 50-50 split. When she died, her shares were supposed to go into a trust for you and your sisters. They weren't supposed to be absorbed by your father. So he stole it, I said, my voice flat. He stole our inheritance. Technically, yes. Legally, it's murky, Henderson sighed. He claims he acted as the trustee and reinvested the funds into the company to save it from bankruptcy. To prove fraud, we need to prove intent. We need to prove he or his new wife deliberately forged or suppressed the trust documents. Elena, I whispered. It was Elena. Probably. Henderson nodded. But proving it requires a forensic audit. That costs money. Real money. $10,000, maybe $15,000 just to start. $15,000? I looked at my hands. They were dry, cracked from handling cardboard boxes at the store. I had exactly $300 in my savings account. I was 25 years old, a college dropout, working 60 hours a week just to keep the lights on in our apartment. I'll get the money, I said, standing up. Sneha, Henderson warned, if you go down this road, you're suing your own father in court. It's going to get ugly. They will drag your name through the mud. They will say you're a greedy, estranged daughter. Are you ready for that? I thought about Tiana's face when she took off her engagement ring. I thought about the empty chair at the Miller's dining table. I don't have a name anymore, Mr. Henderson, I said. I just have a debt to collect. But getting the money was harder than the resolve. I picked up a third job, bartending on weekends. My life became a blur of retail shifts, pouring drinks for drunk college kids and sleeping for 4 hours a night. I was a zombie. I stopped eating properly. I lived on caffeine and rage. And that's when the suffocating question started. It came from the community, the network of aunties and family friends who had known Mom. They saw me running myself into the ground. They saw Ria and Tiana flourishing. Ria was acing her nursing classes. Tiana was back in art school, but they saw me fading. Sneha Beta, Mrs. Patel, an old friend of Mom's, cornered me one Sunday at the grocery store. Look at you. You have dark circles under your eyes. You are too thin. I'm working hard, Auntie, I said, trying to move my cart past her. For what? She asked, gripping my arm. To fight a war you can't win. You are 25. In our culture, in any culture, this is the time to build your own life, not fix your father's. She lowered her voice, her tone turning spiritorial. There is a boy, Samir. He is an engineer, very stable. His family knows about your situation. They don't mind. They are willing to help. If you marry Sneha, you will have support. You won't have to carry this burden alone. I felt the walls of the grocery aisle closing in. I don't want to marry Auntie, I said, pulling my arm away. Why? She pressed. Because of what your father did. Don't punish yourself for his sins. You need a partner. You need someone to take care of you. You can't be the mother and the father forever. Take care of me. The phrase triggered a gag reflex. I looked at her and for a second I saw Elena. I saw how Elena took care of Dad. I saw how Dad took care of us by writing cheques to make us go away. I don't need saving. I snapped louder than I intended. People turned to look. I'm not a damsel in distress, Mrs. Patel. I'm the one holding the sword. I walked away, leaving her stunned the produce aisle. But the question followed me. It wasn't just Mrs. Patel, it was everywhere. My cousins were getting engaged. My Facebook feed was a parade of diamond rings and I said yes photos. Everyone was moving forward, building families, trusting people, and I was paralysed. It wasn't that I didn't want love. God, I wanted it. I wanted someone to hold me at night and tell me I didn't have to be strong for 5 minutes. But every time a guy showed interest, I felt a wave of nausea. A commitment phobia. That's what the internet called it. But it was deeper than that. It was terror. I saw my father in every man I met. I saw the potential for betrayal. I saw the switch. The way Dad went from being a loving father to a stranger in a suit. If my own father, the first man I ever loved, could replace me, erase me, and throw me away for a better offer, why wouldn't a husband? A week later, Ria came into my room. She sat on the edge of my bed. Sneha, she said softly. You need to go out. I'm going to work in an hour, I mumbled, burying my face in the pillow. No, I mean out on a date. I rolled over and glared at her. Are you kidding me? No, she said, her face serious. You're miserable, you're angry all the time, you're turning into stone. My friend has a brother. His name is Mark, he's a paralegal, he's nice. Just coffee, please, for me. I don't have time for Mark, I said. I have to raise 15 grand to sue Dad. The lawsuit can wait for 1 hour, Ria yelled. It was the first time she had ever yelled at me. You are killing yourself for us, Sneha. But what happens when we leave? Tiana is in New York. I'm going to move out when I graduate. You're going to be alone in this apartment with nothing but court documents and resentment. Is that what Mum wanted? Her words hit me like a slap. Alone with resentment. Fine, I whispered. 1 coffee. If it sucks, I'm leaving. The coffee shop was a trendy spot in Brooklyn with exposed brick walls and overpriced lattes. Mark was already there. He was cute in a generic way. Plaid shirt, glasses, kind smile. Sneha. He stood up. Ria talks about you all the time. The super sister. I forced a smile. And that's me. The superhero with the caffeine addiction. We sat down. He was nice. He was genuinely nice. And he asked about my job. I lied and said I was in management, leaving out the part about folding jeans. He talked about his dog. He cracked a few jokes that were actually funny. For about 20 minutes, I felt normal. I felt like a 25-year-old woman on a Sunday afternoon. But then the conversation pivoted. So, Mark said, leaning back, Ria mentioned you guys have had a rough time with your family. That must be hard. I'm really close with my parents. We do Sunday dinner every week. It's non-negotiable. Sunday dinner, non-negotiable. The image flashed in my mind. The miller's table, the empty chair, the white museum where Elena reigned. That sounds nice, I said, my voice tightened. Yeah, it is. Mark smiled, oblivious. I think family is everything, you know, like at the end of the day, that's all you have. I want that for myself one day. A big family, a wife who, you know, prioritises that. Who wants to build a home? He looked at me with hopeful eyes. Do you want kids? The question was innocent, standard first date material. But in my head, it was a grenade. Kids. I thought about my sisters. I thought about the nights I held Tiana while she cried for Mum. I thought about the parent-teacher conferences I attended at age 19. I thought about the crushing weight of responsibility I had carried for a decade. I had already raised 2 kids. I had already given up my youth, my dreams, my sleep, my sanity to build a home that collapsed anyway. And this guy, this nice, stable guy wanted me to sign up for more. He wanted me to trust that he wouldn't wake up one day, decide he was bored and trade me in for a newer model like Dad did. My chest constricted. The air in the coffee shop felt thick, like syrup. I couldn't breathe. Sneha, Mark asked, his smile fading. You okay? I can't, I stammered. Can't what? I can't do this. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly. I can't do the Sunday dinners. I can't do the building a home. I can't be the wife you want. Whoa, hey. Mark stood up, looking confused. I was just making conversation. We don't have to get married tomorrow. You don't get it, I said, my voice rising. I felt tears pricking my eyes, tears of frustration, brokenness. It's a lie. It's all a lie. You say you want family, but what happens when it gets hard? What happens when I get sick like my mother? Will you stay or will you find an Eleanor? Who is Elena? Mark asked, looking around as people started to stare. The ghost, I whispered. The ghost that eats families. I grabbed my purse and ran. I ran out of the coffee shop, down the block and into the subway station. I didn't stop until I was on the train, gasping for air. People looking at me like I was crazy. I sat there rocking back and forth, realising the terrifying truth that Dad hadn't just taken the money. He hadn't just taken the house. He had taken my ability to believe in the future. He had infected me with his betrayal. I was so terrified of becoming him or becoming the victim of someone like him that I was choosing isolation. I was choosing the cage. I got home and collapsed on the floor. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt hollowed out. My phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. I wanted to disappear. But the Super Sister programming kicked in. I swiped right. Hello, Sneha. Henderson's voice was different this time. Excited, urgent. You're not going to believe this. What? I asked dully. I have a friend in the district attorney's office. I asked him to run a quiet background check on Elena, just a hunch. And it turns out Elena isn't exactly who she says she is. Her name isn't Elena Vance, it's Elena Varkos, and she has a record in Florida. I sat up. What kind of record? Fraud, Henderson said. Embezzlement. She targets older, wealthy men, widowers mostly. She marries them, isolates them from their families, drains the accounts into offshore shells and then vanishes or waits for them to die. The room spun. It wasn't just a bad stepmother story. It wasn't just a midlife crisis. My father was a mark and he was a victim of a professional con artist. Oh my God, I whispered. There's more, Henderson said. I found a discrepancy in your father's recent filings. A signature on a loan application. It's his name, but the handwriting matches Elena's previous forgeries. Sneha, she's leveraging the company. She's taking out massive debt in his name. If this bursts, your father goes to prison for bank fraud or he loses everything. He doesn't know, I asked. I doubt it. She's likely forging his consent. Henderson paused. Here is the choice, Sneha. We can use this. We can go to the police. We can expose her. But if we do, the company collapses. The assets get frozen. Your father will likely face criminal charges for negligence or complicity. He will be ruined publicly, financially, totally. And the money? I asked. The trust fund? Gone, Henderson said. If the bank seizes the assets, creditors get paid first. You get nothing, but you get revenge. You get to see her in handcuffs and you get to save your father from being bled dry, even if it destroys him. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark living room. The suffocating question had changed. It wasn't, will I ever get married? It was, do I love my father enough to save him, even if it means destroying him? Or do I walk away? Do I let her finish the job? Do I let him rot in the bed he made? I thought about the date with Mark. I thought about the fear. I thought about how broken I was. And then I realised if I walked away now, she wins. If I let her destroy him, she wins because she proved that family means nothing. But if I fight, if I blow it all up, maybe, just maybe, I can reclaim the one thing she couldn't steal, my dignity. I stood up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city light. I wasn't going to get married. I wasn't going to have Sunday dinners. I was going to be the demolition expert. I picked up the phone and dialed Henderson back. Do it! I said, burn it down, burn it all down. The morning we went to the White Museum for the last time, it was raining. Not a drizzle, but a hard, cold East Coast downpour that felt like the sky was trying to scrub the earth clean. I sat in the back of Mr. Henderson's sedan. Beside me sat a detective from the fraud division. In the front seat, Henderson was reviewing the indictment papers. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was it. The moment I had replayed in my head 1,000 times, the moment the monster gets unmasked. Remember, Sneha, Henderson said, looking at me through the rearview mirror. Let the officers do the talking. She is dangerous. When cornered narcissists don't cry, they bite. I know, I said, staring at the raindrops racing down the window. I'm ready. We pulled up to the driveway. The house looked imposing in the grey light. The perfect hedges, the pristine windows. It all looked like a fortress protecting a lie. We walked to the door. Henderson rang the bell. Elena opened it. She was wearing a white cashmere robe, holding a cup of herbal tea. She looked annoyed, like we were interrupting a spa day. Sneha, she sneered, her eyes flicking to the police officer behind me. I told you not to come here without an appointment. And who are these people? If this is about your sister's tuition again, it's pathetic. It's not about tuition, Elena, I said. My voice was calm, unnervingly calm. And it's not Eleanor, is it? It's Miss Varkos. Her face went pale. The cup in her hand rattled against the saucer. I don't know what you're talking about, she hissed, trying to slam the door. The detective stepped forward, blocking the door with his foot. Elena Varkos, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft and embezzlement. We have a warrant to search the premises. No, she screamed, her voice cracking. Robert, call the lawyers. They are harassing me. Dad appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked older than ever, grey, hunched, confused. He was wearing his pyjamas. What is going on? He asked, his voice trembling. Sneha, why are there police in my house? They're arresting her, Dad, I said, stepping into the foyer. The air smelled of expensive lilies and impending doom. Arresting her? Dad laughed nervously. For what? Being strict with you? This is ridiculous. Officer, tell them to leave. Sir, the detective said, walking up the stairs. Your wife has been using your identity to secure fraudulent loans totaling $3 million. She has diverted company assets to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands under the name Varkos Holdings. We have the bank records. Dad stopped. He looked at the detective, then at Elena. Loans, Dad whispered. But she told me the company was profitable. She told me she was handling the books. Elena's mask fell. It was terrifying to watch. The concerned stepmother face vanished. The loving wife act evaporated. In its place was a cold, hard sneer. She realised the game was over. She realised the exit strategy had failed. She turned to Dad. "You idiot!" she spat. Dad recoiled as if she had slapped him. "Elena! You pathetic, weak old man," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Did you really think I was handling the books because I loved accounting? You were an easy mark, Robert, a grieving widower with a guilt complex and a saviour delusion. You practically handed me the pen to sign the cheque. I loved you," Dad stammered, tears filling his eyes. "I gave you everything. I pushed my daughters away for you. And that made it so much easier," she laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Getting rid of the brats was the best part. God, they were annoying, whining about their dead mother. You were so desperate to be happy you let me erase them." The officer grabbed her wrists. "Miss Varkos, turn around, hands behind your back." As they handcuffed her, she looked at me. Her eyes were black hole. "You think you won?" she whispered to me as they dragged her past. "Look at him, Sneha. Look at your father. I didn't destroy him. He was already broken. I just sold the pieces." They marched her out into the rain. The flashing blue lights of the cruiser illuminated the foyer in a rhythmic, chaotic pulse. I stood there looking up the stairs. Dad was slumped against the banister. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. He was sobbing. Not the quiet weeping of a man in mourning, but the heaving, ugly sobbing of a man who realises he has been a fool. I walked up the stairs slowly. My shoes clicked on the marble floor. I stood over him. He looked up. His eyes were red, swollen, pleading. He looked like a child. He reached out a hand toward me. "Sneha!" he choked out. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I thought she was helping us." I looked at his hand, the hand that used to braid my hair, the hand that signed the checks to silence us, the hand that pushed us out of this house. I didn't take it. "You didn't know because you didn't want to look, Dad," I said softly. "I'm so sorry," he wept, burying his face in his knees. "I've lost everything. The money, the company. It's all gone, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, "it's gone. But I have you." He looked up again, a desperate hope in his eyes. "I have my girls. We can start over, right? We're a family." This was the moment. The Hollywood ending would be for me to hug him, tell him all is forgiven and say we'll rebuild together. But real life isn't a movie, and trauma doesn't disappear just because the villain is in handcuffs. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. "Dad," I said, "I love you. You are my father, but I am not your crutch." He blinked, confused. "I will help you with the lawyers," I continued. "I will make sure you don't go to jail for her crime. I will help you find a small apartment, but I am not moving back in. I am not going to take care of you. I am not going to be the wife you lost or the mother you need. But where will I go?" he whispered. "I'm alone." "Yes," I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "You are alone, and so were we. For 10 years, we were alone. You have to learn how to sit with that loneliness, Dad. You have to learn how to be a person again, not just a victim." I stood up. "I'm going to go now," I said. "Henderson will call you tomorrow." "Sneha, don't leave me," he cried out, reaching for my leg. I stepped back. "I'm not leaving you, Dad. I'm finally saving myself." I turned around and walked down the stairs, and I walked out the front door. Leaving the White Museum behind, I stepped into the rain. It felt cold and clean on my face. 1 year later, the art gallery in Chelsea was packed. Tiana's exhibit, titled "The Empty Chair," was the talk of the town. The centrepiece was a chaotic, beautiful, abstract painting of a dinner table with one missing seat surrounded by shadows that looked like ghosts. I stood in the corner, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching my sister. She was radiant. She was laughing, talking to critics, holding her head high. She wasn't the scared girl crying over a tuition check anymore. She was an artist. Ria was there too, wearing scrubs because she had just come off a shift at the hospital. She was grinning, pointing at a painting that looked suspiciously like our old beat-up Honda Civic. And Dad was there. He stood near the entrance, wearing a suit that was a little too big for him. He looked frazzled. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. He worked as consultant, trying to pay off the debts Elena left behind. He was tired. He was humble. He waved at Tiana shyly. She waved back, smiled, but didn't run to him. They had coffee once a month. It was polite. It was healing. but it wasn't the same. The trust was a vase that had been shattered. We had glued it back together, but it couldn't hold water anymore. It was just for display. And me? I walked out onto the balcony of the gallery to get some air. The New York skyline glittered before me. I was 26 now. I had finished my degree online. I was working as a paralegal for Henderson, helping victims of financial fraud. It was heavy work, but it felt right. A man walked out onto the balcony. It wasn't Mark, it was someone new. His name was Alex. We had been on 3 dates. He stood next to me looking at the city. "Your sister is talented," he said. "She is," I smiled. "You look happy," he observed. "I am," I said, and I meant it. "So," Alex turned to me, leaning against the railing, "my parents are in town next weekend. They do this big Sunday brunch thing. I was wondering if you wanted to come." My heart stuttered. Sunday brunch. Parent. Meeting the family. The old panic flared up. The commitment phobia. The voice in my head screamed, "Run! He'll trap you! He'll turn into them." I looked at Alex. He wasn't Dad. He wasn't David. He was just a guy asking a girl to eat pancakes. I took a deep breath. I acknowledged the fear. I let it sit there like an old scar. "Alex," I said, "Yeah, I can't do brunch next weekend," I said. Well, his face fell slightly. "Oh, okay, no pressure." But I continued, "I'm free for coffee on Tuesday. Just coffee, just us." He smiled, a real patient smile. Coffee sounds perfect. I looked back at the city. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't cured. I still flinched when people raised their voices. I still checked my bank account 3 times a day out of paranoia. I still didn't know if I could ever walk down an aisle and say I do without wanting to vomit. But I realised something important. Family isn't a destiny you are doomed to repeat. It's not a curse in your blood. I broke the cycle. I didn't let the bitterness turn me into Elena. I didn't let the abandonment turn me into Dad. I absorbed the blow and I didn't pass it on. My sisters were safe. My father was accountable and I was free. I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I was just Sneha. And for the first time in 10 years, the story wasn't about surviving the next chapter. It was about writing my own. I took a sip of my water, looked at the moon hanging over the Hudson River and finally, truly exhaled.